Hey, how are you? Today I want to talk to you about a poem. Now, this poem is very old, and it's a poem that was introduced to me a long time ago. It's 110 years old. The poem is called If by Rudyard Kipling. And the reason we're talking about this poem today is because I think it really provides a manual for what we're going through right now. And society is changing, and we're going through this pandemic right now. And I believe the poem is the perfect representation of how a person can grow through what we're going through right now. So right now we have a sort of abundance of people who are not grown-ups. They're just older people, but they're really just older children. And the ethos of this poem is all about how you can grow up and you can evolve, but you need to know how you can evolve. And you need to measure yourself. How do you measure yourself when you are a grown-up? How do you measure yourself when you're evolved? So I believe this poem provides a perfect example of what a grown-up does and how a grown-up behaves. And like I said, it's one of the first summaries of Stoicism. And everybody wants to talk about Stoicism in the time of peace and modern luxury and comfort. And then a pandemic hits, and it seems like everybody forgets about how to be a Stoic. Everybody read that book, How Not to Give a Fuck, and now everybody forgot. So I want to share this poem with you and give you an opportunity to listen to my analysis of each line and tell you what I think each line means and why the line is important now more than ever before in the history of people. So first I'm going to crack into the poem, I'm going to read it, then I'm going to tell you all about my ideas and what I think the poem means. So here's the poem. If by Rudyard Kipling. If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you. If you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too. If you can wait and not be tired by waiting, or being lied about, don't deal in lies, or being hated, don't give way to hating, and yet don't look too good, nor talk too wise. If you can dream and not make dreams your master, if you can think and not make thoughts your aim, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two impostors just the same, if you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools, or watch the things you gave your life to, broken, and stoop and build 'em up with worn-out tools, if you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss, and lose and start again at your beginnings, and never breathe a word about your loss, if you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone, and so hold on when there is nothing in you except the will which says to them, hold on, if you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings nor lose the common touch, if neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you, but none too much, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it, and which is more, you'll be a man, my son. So that was If by Rudyard Kipling. And now I want to remind you that this is my analysis, this is my interpretation. So it might not be the perfect interpretation. There might be many, many books written about what the poem actually means. So the opening line of the poem, if you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you. So right now the system is sort of collapsing in the world. People are playing the blame game all over the world. And countries are blaming other countries, governments are blaming people, people are blaming governments right now. And I think it's important that everybody keep a cool head. And so if you want to survive this pandemic, you really need to keep a cool head and not worry about blaming. The second line, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, and make an allowance for their doubting too. So really, can you believe in yourself? Can you listen to your own voice in this sea of noise and distraction? Right now, I think that it's probably the hardest time in the world to feel clarity on what you think and believe. And if anyone believes something with 100% certainty, I would really highly doubt that person, because we live in extremely confusing times. I think the second part of that second line is, can you actually listen to someone else's opinion and give it weight? Can you think about what it means? Can you analyze it? Can you entertain it? Can you decide if it's right? Can you have rational thinking abilities and be able to look at an argument and make sure it makes sense? So the third line, if you can wait and not be tired by waiting or being lied about, don't deal in lies. So patience, right? Right now, everybody wants to rush and get through this as quickly as possible. And I remember reading a post on Reddit right around the time when this thing started in America and we went into lockdown. And someone basically said, so what do you think? Do you think the gyms are going to be open in 2 weeks after this is done? And everyone was just like, oh, maybe. But in my head, I was thinking, man, you got to have patience with this. You really have to wait and not get tired of waiting. The second part, or being lied about, but don't deal in lies. So in our time right now, everybody feels like we're being lied to, and there's mass manipulation going on. And it's very easy to receive this type of behavior and then give it back. You know, he lied to me, so I want to lie to him. And I believe this poem really tells you that that's not acceptable and that you might be lied to. But when you're lied to, it's more important than ever not to spread further lies. And the next line, or being hated, don't give way to hating. And yet, don't look too good, nor talk too wise. So meeting hate with love and indifference, I think this is really important for people. So right now there's a lot of people hating on other people, and it's very, especially on the internet, it's very easy to get wrapped up into some hatred towards somebody, feel anxiety and want to lash out. And I think that this poem is reminding people not to talk about people like that. So people might hate on you, but it doesn't pay to hate back. And the second part, don't look too good, nor talk too wise. So I think everybody's in our modern era is in this rush to look perfect. Everybody wants to look perfect, and everybody wants to talk really smooth. And even when I shoot this video, I'm censoring myself. I don't want to look stupid. I don't want to take too long of a pause. I don't want to say and it's really kind of a flaw in our society that we're so afraid to look stupid. And I think this poem is reminding us with that line, don't look too good nor talk too wise. Don't be too smooth. Try to appear common, try to appear somewhat approachable so that people could connect with you. And I think that's really important these days, is the ability for people to connect with you. So the next line, if you can dream and not make dreams your master, if you can think and not make thoughts your aim. So I suffer from this. Sometimes I daydream too much, and I know in the past I've daydreamed a lot, and it's gotten in the way of real execution of what I needed to get done. So if you can dream but not make dreams your master, what does that mean? So it means having that ability to dream about something, to have a big vision for life or business idea or creativity, but not to make it your master. Someone who dreams every minute of their day is like a child. So children really don't get a whole lot done, but some of the most successful and happy people are the kinds of people that can learn to wrestle that ability to dream and turn it into a discipline where they can spend most of their time executing, getting stuff done, but then they can enter this space of crazy creativity and crazy dreaming. And the second part, if you can think and not make thoughts your aim. I mean, personally, there are days when I walk around and I walk from one place to another where I realize that I just spent the whole time, like a 20-minute walk, I spent the whole time thinking. And I think now more than ever, we have let thoughts just become us, and we spend very little time in presence. And I think that right now in the pandemic, thoughts are going crazy. I'm having full-fledged conversations in my head, arguments in my head about what I would say politically and something about social change and things like that. And it's kind of getting out of control. And I think now more than ever, it's time to stay present and not make thoughts your aim, you know? It's more important now than ever to make thoughts something you can do occasionally. And sometimes you critically think, or sometimes you work out this problem, that problem, but thoughts are not the most important thing. They're not your aim. You spend more time in presence than you do in thinking. So the next line is really important right now. If you can meet triumph and disaster and treat those two imposters just the same. So this is Stoicism at its core. You know, can you win $1 million? And when you win $1 million, you go, great, cool, that's awesome. Can you, when you face financial catastrophe or a pandemic or enormous heartbreak or something tragic like that, you also say, cool, great, awesome. I think that is what the line is really getting at in this poem. Can you look at all external circumstances in your life as basically the same, not good, not bad, but just objectively look at them as external circumstances, nothing more? There's nothing inherently bad about having to sit inside your house on lockdown, but Stoicism at its core tells you that it's not the external circumstances, but it's how you feel about them that really defines the circumstance. So, can you look at the world right now and not judge it and just sort of look at it and, okay, cool, we'll get through this, that's fine. The next line is, if you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools. So right now we're seeing censorship, we're seeing politicians say certain things, we're seeing a million articles about the same thing. One news outlet puts something out about face masks, and then another news outlet says that face masks aren't necessary. So can you hear words, sometimes even your own, can you hear them and notice that they're being twisted? Words are being twisted, perceptions are being shaped in negative ways. And can you sit with that feeling and just accept that right now there are lots of lies going on? And the next part, or watch the things you gave your life to broken, and stoop and build them up with worn out tools. So in the next few months and in the last month, we've seen businesses fail. We've seen people lose their jobs. Maybe creative projects are failing. Maybe you run a research project and you lost your funding. Maybe your startup crashed. And Stoicism and this poem, I believe, are really encouraging you to look at that and just breathe. Look at the thing you've worked so hard to build, and it's crashed, it's broken. And then what do you do in this pandemic? And this poem teaches you that you just get back to work, because that's all you can do. Stoop and build them up with worn out tools. So worn out tools, why worn out? Because you've spent so much time maybe hammering. You've been hammering. I've been hammering so long on business stuff, and I've failed basically since winter of 2017. I've been basically hammering. My tools are getting worn out, and I've just been hammering. And so the pandemic happens to us and ruins many people's businesses, many people's creative projects. And the tools are worn out, but you've got to make do and figure out the best way. You know, maybe your hammer's broken in half, so you have to find a new way to keep hammering. Next, if you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss. So, can you take huge risks in pursuit of your dreams? So this was always really applicable before the pandemic. After the pandemic, people who risk greatly are able to win big. But I think it's more important in the wake of the pandemic because people are going to be scared. So people are afraid to make investments right now. People are afraid to start new businesses now. This is a time of enormous opportunity. And like all times of opportunity, it takes a ton of confidence and it takes a ton of courage. And can you risk it all? Can you risk it all right now? Right now, I'm in Bangkok. It's probably not the smartest thing in the world to do. My dad is probably sitting there with my mom talking about how I've made a terrible decision with my life, but I'm risking it. I'm here now. I'm here to work on this channel. And it's really that confidence in being able to say, I might lose everything, but I'm going to go all in on this. And that's how riches are made. That's how successes happen. And I think the pandemic is going to separate people who were never willing to risk and people who are willing to risk to win big in life. And on the flip side of that, we have the other line, and lose and start again at your beginnings and never breathe a word about your loss. So can you start all over and not complain about it? Rock bottom is terrifying. I know, I've been there. And there are many people who are going to have to start over after this pandemic. And even if you risk big, maybe you go start a business right now and in a year it fails. Can you just keep moving without complaining about it? I think that's extremely important going forward. And in reality, people after this pandemic, what are they really going to say? Oh, the pandemic. I couldn't do it because of the pandemic. The pandemic took my business. Coronavirus took my job. But no one's going to care because no one ever really cares about your problems. They only care about themselves. But especially after this pandemic, people are really going to only care about themselves. And guess what? The pandemic screwed all of us. But if you can get through this and never breathe a word about your losses, then you're a better person for it. If you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone. So to me, I interpret this line of the poem as, can you use the time you've had in life to build a legacy long after you've been gone? And I think that's important right now. People are realizing that life is very short. Something can happen at any moment. And if you haven't done something that you're proud of, you're going to look back on your life and feel pretty terrible about it. So people are looking and thinking, what kind of legacy can I build? And what can I create? What can last beyond my flesh, my bone, my sinew, my heart? What can I create? What sort of lasting impression can I leave on the world? And the next line, and so hold on when there is nothing in you, except the will which says to them, hold on. So can you keep pushing through this? You might feel like you are at your limit right now, but can you keep holding on? It goes back to that patience that we talked about before. more often than not, success and achieving something come from just holding on, from not quitting. And then, if you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings, nor lose the common touch. So human dignity right now, that line to me before the pandemic struck, that meant, can you walk with commoners? Can you walk with a homeless person? Can you have a conversation with a homeless person? And then the next hour, you go meet a politician or you go meet a billionaire, and the way you look at them, the way you speak to them is from that same centered place. Can you do that? I don't think most people can do that. And I think it's a tragedy in our times. And this poem, 100 years old, 110 years old, is talking about how important it is to not lose the common touch, but also not lose virtue. And I think that that's so powerful. And human dignity, it's so important in the wake of this, understanding that what unites all of us in this pandemic is our humanity, is our susceptibility to getting sick. And I think that's so important to remember in the wake of this, that we are all human. And I think people are afraid to call this the great leveler because they don't want to imagine that they're saying that people are going to fall or whatever. But I think it's the great equalizer and reminds us that pandemics don't give a shit about countries and borders and races and colors and genders and all that, and that it can affect everyone. And I think that's important to remember moving forward. And the next line, if neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, can you make yourself bulletproof? To me, that means we have these people in our lives. Sometimes our family and our loved ones can hurt us the most. Oftentimes they hurt us more than people we don't know. So can you become bulletproof? And I think now is the perfect time for people to work on themselves. People are going within and they're building themselves from without for the first time, maybe in a long time. And I think that's one of the aims of this channel, is to teach people how to go within and build themselves up so that foes nor loving friends can hurt you. The words of people you hate and the words of people you love have no meaning on you because you derive your sense of happiness and validation from within. If all men count with you, but none too much. So to me, this means trust yourself first. You respect everyone, but you don't depend on everyone. And I think that's really important in the wake of this pandemic, is to think about trusting yourself first. I think we've lost our ability to trust ourselves, and it's really a terrible thing. I think it's bad for the human individual, and I think it's bad for society because it's going to make people dependent on someone else to give them an opinion. And I think one of my goals is to help people understand that they should be able to trust themselves. And through our guided meditations and affirmations and visualization work, we try to teach people to find clarity within. And that clarity, I think, is just to help people trust themselves. How hard is it to make a decision about certain things? Life decisions are almost impossible to make, and they're a huge source of stress for people when they really shouldn't. They should be a little easier, and I think it's because we give too much credence to people outside of us instead of trusting ourselves. And the next line, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run. So if you can spend your time wisely, so if you can fill a minute with a minute worth of distance run, I think he's saying that people need to use their time wisely, and especially on a macro level and a micro level. So in life, we should fill our life with a full life, and many people don't. Many people get to the end of their lives and they think, wow, that was kind of a disappointment. If you've ever read Top 5 Regrets of the Dying, you really understand how much people regret when they die, and it's typically the same things over and over. And one of them, I believe, is not doing what I wanted to do more often. And so when you look at it on a micro level, think about your time in pandemic. Are you using your time in this pandemic, the lockdown, the quarantines? Are you using it wisely? Are you filling this time with things that really make you happy? Which brings us to the last line. If you can do all that, if you can do all of that, yours is the earth and everything that's in it. And which is more, you'll be a man, my son. So I think he's saying that if you can do this, if you can do that, if you can do this other thing, if you can do all of that, then everything in the world is yours. And that doesn't mean it actually is yours. It doesn't mean monetary riches. I believe it means you have the utmost potential within you to do whatever you want to do. I think this poem represents the foundations of a whole person. And the last line is, you'll be a man, my son. And I think what the writer really meant by that was, you'll be a grown-up. So I'm not sure if he wrote this to his actual son. He might have. I think a better way to translate it now would be, you're a grown-up. You're an adult. And I think that's really important in this time. So to me, that means you're welcome to all the treasures of the world because you've transformed within, because you find out the treasures of the world are actually inside of you. And if you can keep these characteristics about you, the characteristics described in the poem, then you can have anything you want, because you already are everything you want.